Hey guys, welcome back to This Is My Testimony. My name is Kim Whitlow. I am your host, and I'm so glad that you are joining me again. I just want to say thank you for all the love and support on the first one that was posted. You guys are just simply amazing, and I'm so grateful for you guys taking the time to tune in. So in the last one, I talked a lot about where the idea of the podcast came from, kind of how it came to be, and all the God moments to go along with it. This time, I'm going to take you through a little bit about my younger years and really how God started working in my life at a very young age, how I tried to run from that, and how He's really brought me back. And so, buckle up. This is just a little bit more about me so that you can understand kind of what makes me me, what He's brought me through that makes me passionate about certain things today. And just another example of how faithful God is and how He never lets you go. So we'll start at a young age. So in the last one, I talked about how my parents farmed. And I talked about how my dad was a pastor. So I was born, again, I was the youngest of four. My older sisters were 12, 14, and 15 years older than me. So I always thought I was a surprise or not planned. Come to find out, I was actually planned. My mom had hit the age where she was like, hey, Dave, if you want more babies, we need to have them now because this baby factory is about close. And so they tried for one more. I always tease her because I'm like, you were trying for a boy, weren't you? Sorry. And they got me. So I was born in 81. They were still living on the farm at the time. So my nursery was actually the bathroom upstairs. And that's where I spent the first 9 months of my life. Not in the bathroom, but on the farm. And then they moved into town. They were building a house in town. And they moved into town. And I lived there until I was about 7. Growing up, I don't remember my oldest two sisters being home much. I was at the age where as I started remembering things, they were getting ready to go off to college. So I really remember the youngest of the three, my sister Corey, being home, but I don't remember her being home a ton. I remember her being in high school and in musicals and different things like that, and band trips. And I remember us fighting at certain things, but there wasn't a whole lot of memory of having sisters in the house with me. So I always tease them, like I felt like I grew up almost like an only child with 4 moms. So we spent... Until I was about 7 years old, we lived in Lena. My dad started pastoring. I think I was around 4. And he pastored in Orangeville, which was about a town that was about a half hour from Lena. And so that was life. I don't really have anything that I can remember from 7 and under that was like traumatizing or anything like that. We did move out to a corner house is what we called it. It was like a 4-way corner. And it was a house on the hill is what I always called it. And it had a silver barn, and it was a beautiful white house. But it wasn't beautiful when we first saw it. We had to, when they bought it, they remodeled it. They did a lot of the work themselves. So I saw my parents work very hard. I remember when my dad was like, this is going to be your room. Like the house had sat empty for years. And so there was like raccoon poo in the corner of my room. And I was 7. So I was like, no, thank you. But anyways, we moved out there. Life was good. Went to church in Orangeville. I remember all the ladies in Orangeville. The average age of the church in Orangeville was, I would probably say 60 and older. And so it was like having a bunch of grandmas all the time. And so my mom played the organ and my dad pastored. So obviously I had to sit with different people. And so I would sit with different ladies all the time. And I can still remember them. And I remember getting candy from them. And I remember just feeling on cloud 9 because I was being spoiled every Sunday morning. And I remember Margie Sheets was my Sunday school teacher. And so the impact that these ladies had on me at a very young age was just amazing. So that was life. Like I said, couldn't complain much. It was good. I grew up on the farm, like farming with my dad. We weren't full-time farming. They had hired hands and stuff. But I remember being able to ride in the tractor with my dad, and we lived kind of on the corner, and I had a best friend that lived like down the road from me, and another one that lived the other way down the road from me. And so I'd hang out with friends, and the country life was good, had dogs, all the things. Like there was nothing looking back that I was like, whew. And then junior high came, and again, my parents were still in ministry and farming and things like that. So they were very busy all the time. I played basketball and ran track in junior high. Junior high was kind of the age, though, that I realized that I didn't seem like I fit in with everybody else. I didn't think that I was friends with a lot of people. I had a lot of friends, but I wasn't one of the skinny girls. We'll put it that way. And so I started to feel a little insecure about myself. I noticed that in junior high. My friends would start to get boyfriends, and I didn't have a boyfriend. I didn't even think a boy liked me. And so there was one of those things where I would look at it and be like, what's wrong with me, right? So starting to go through all the emotions of what it is in that junior high phase, which is even crazier these days because I feel like they're growing up so much faster. I also remember that junior high is when I started to figure out that I really did like leadership, and I like to lead other people. I remember at the end of my 8th grade year, we're getting ready to go into high school, and my principal of the junior high at the time, Mr. Black, had pulled me into his office. Now, Mr. Black was pretty intimidating. He didn't really mess around in his class. He would joke around about some things, but it wasn't somebody that I would always run to for advice or help or anything like that. He taught science when I was in 6th and 7th grade. But he pulls me in his office and he's like, we need to talk. And I thought I was in trouble. I was a little outspoken. Sometimes I covered up my insecurities by being the know-it-all, the smartest one in the room. And I wouldn't always say I was sarcastic. I was just known for being vocal. And so I remember sitting across from him and he said, you have leadership skills. And this is the first time I can remember anybody telling me, besides my father, that I had leadership skills. And I was like, okay. And you're young, you're in 8th grade. And I'm like, what am I going to do with those? And he said, I think that you need to run for class president next year for your freshman class. And I thought, okay, what is that? And he just kind of gave me the description of what it was and to be an officer and really the different qualities that he had seen in me, and asked if I would put in it somebody could nominate me and then I could write up a description about myself. So I went for it. I was like, okay, that's cool. And I think that a lot of times the affirmation or the attention I was seeking from my peers, I didn't always get. So I would take the stuff that I would get for being a leader or for standing out or being the top of my class or being good at school. And so I went for that. And then I also remember it was the end of the year and we had crazy dress up days. And so I think it was backwards day or something. I came downstairs that morning and I was decked out. I was going to be crazy. And my mom said, absolutely not. You are not wearing that today. Go upstairs and change. And I was like, what? Mom, it's crazy backwards day. And she was like, nope, you're not wearing that. Got in a big fight. I changed. I was obedient and I changed, I think, from what I can remember. And I went to school and I was mad. I was so mad at my mom. But come to find out, we had an award ceremony that afternoon at school. And I was going to receive the American Legion Award that was voted on from my peers for leadership and citizenship. And there was some different qualities. But she knew the principal had called her. I did not know. And she knew that the paper was going to be there. And she just didn't want me to look ridiculous in the paper. So thank you, Mom, for always looking out for me. You're amazing. You're amazing. So that was when I really started to realize that I did have some different skills and that I did have this desire to lead people and kind of stand out. But then again, at the same time, I was still facing my own insecurities. The summer between my 8th grade year and my freshman year, I had friends. We hung out all the time. People would come up to the house. We lived in the country, so we had things that we would do out there. And I just remember hanging out with my friends all summer long. I remember being at my friend's house one time, and he had we were at a party, a freshman party though, popping pizza, nothing. My grade didn't really do all of that in high school. And so it was a pretty low-key party, and I remember sitting across the table from him talking, and he's like, oh, I've been sick. And I was like, yeah. And he's like, yeah, but it's okay. When I don't feel good, I just go in the bathroom and make myself throw up so I can just get it over with. And I remember thinking to myself, how do you do that? And I had heard about eating disorders and all that kind of stuff. I just never really understood how people made themselves throw up. I know that sounds ridiculous, but when I was sick, I threw up. I didn't make myself throw up ever. And I remember going home that night and trying it. And that became the very beginning of what was a very, very long nightmare of life, and like a very long battle and addiction that I went through, which started off my eating disorder. And so that was into my freshman year. I started school. I wasn't a cheerleader. I played basketball my freshman year, or I tried to. At that time, though, I had gotten so far into the eating disorder, I started to drop weight pretty quickly. I wasn't super heavy, but I wasn't small. And so when I dropped weight, it wasn't like it was anything alarming. I guess I could put it that way. Or maybe I was just busy. I had a lot of different friends. I didn't have a specific friend group all the time. I was pretty much friends with everybody. And so my mom always teased me that I counseled a lot of people, that I always tried to take care of people. So it's probably still true today. But I remember the phone ringing at night and she'd be like, well, Kimberly, who needs counseling now? Like, who needs you now? And so it was one of those things where I always knew that I loved to give advice. I could listen to people. And so maybe I was just so busy doing that people just didn't notice what I was going through. Or they noticed and they just didn't feel comfortable saying anything, because how do you say something to somebody? So I just remember starting to not feel very good. I was pretty much throwing up everything that I was eating. I was either eating or not eating, or I was throwing up what I was eating. And I remember being in the weight room, basketball practice, and I remember passing out. And then it took me a second to come back. And I just told them, like, oh, I probably just need some water. And so that kind of started where I started to get pretty sick. And to the point where I ended up having to quit basketball just because I didn't have the strength to do it. And my parents had started to notice that something was going on. And I remember my mom approached me in my room. I can even feel it still. She walked in the door and I'm standing across from her. And she had noticed that the toilet paper, like I was going through a lot of toilet paper, probably like wiping my hand, my mouth, whatever, trying to clean myself up. And she said, are you making yourself throw up? I remember standing there and I just looked at her and I was like, and I just remember all the blood rushing from my head and I passed out. Like I passed out against the wall. And she was angry at me, and then I was like, oh, you're mad at me, but I'm going through all these things. And as a mom now, it was more of like a worried, mad, like, how do I help my daughter? I don't know how. And so I told her I would stop. Obviously I didn't. I just hid it a little bit better. And there was one time I was getting out of the shower and passed out and hit my head. And that's a humbling moment when your mom, as you're a freshman, has to come into the bathroom and clean you up and get you dressed because you are too weak. And so she took me to the doctor. He ended up telling her to take me to the hospital. I was put in the hospital for a day or two, just very, very dehydrated. And they wanted me to go back to see the doctor. He was talking to me about some things that I was going through, just asked me how I was feeling. But he was like a family doctor, you know, like he knew my parents. And I just didn't really feel comfortable talking to him much. So he put me on like Prozac or something like that, which I didn't feel like was helping at all. But I did it for my parents and kind of went through the motions. And I was angry, I think, at them for not understanding, but at the same time, glad that they weren't in my business like that, because I was still dealing with how I was feeling. So that was really my freshman year, is kind of how that went. It wasn't bad. Like, I loved school. I loved my friends. I think that it was almost like having two personalities or two different lives. Like I was struggling with this dark thing over here, and yet I loved my friends and I hung out and I was enjoying school and I was at the top of my class and I was excelling in all this other stuff. And so it was just a very weird time. I tried to get the most out of high school. Went to my sophomore year and I was invited to a youth group by my friend Laura. So the church that I was going to with my parents didn't have any youth my age. And if they did, like, they were still a half hour away from me. And so we didn't have a youth group. They had their own thing. And so I didn't really have anything that I was getting fed from. Now, I love my dad and I love to hear him preach now. But back then, it wasn't something that I was like, wow, that was really good, right? I wasn't getting fed from my dad's preaching. Not that I probably couldn't, but at that time, I was just in a weird place. So anyways, God put people in my path, and my friend Laura came up to me and said, you should come to youth group with me. I think that you would love it. And so I remember going to youth group with her. We started going to youth group at Crossroads, which is the church I go to now. And so I remember walking into youth group and just feeling this atmosphere of just acceptance. And there were so many cool people there, and it was full of like kids my age. And I absolutely loved it. Like I was like in right away, would go to youth group with her. I think it was like every Wednesday or Thursday, and really found some really key friends that I'm still friends with today, and even leaders. I always tell people this story, and my youth leader, John Eastlake, is now my pastor. And so I always tell people, like, isn't it amazing how like God just brings people back together like full circle? And so John Eastlake was part of the youth group. Dee Winter, who is now one of my closest friends and mentor, has been my entire life, was a youth leader then. I thought she was so much older than me, and come to find out she really wasn't. And she was so much fun then too. Like God just really was putting the people in my path that I needed the entire time. And I just remember I would go to youth group, and I would sit there and I would be like, Lord, this is so heavy. Take this from me. And I would be in worship, and I would be trying to surrender and give him everything, so that I could just break this chain and break this addiction and not feel this feeling of being not enough and so insecure and unlovable. I pretty much felt like I was unlovable. And I remember going to youth group, and it would be good. I'm giving it to the Lord. I'm committing it. And then I would get home, and then that addiction would creep up again. And it would be like just one more time. And so I would binge and purge. And then I remember afterwards, because my parents went to bed early, I didn't really have a curfew. I was the fourth kid. No, I'm just kidding. I wasn't a bad kid. I was coming home from youth group. So sometimes they would be in bed. They'd have to get up early and farm or go to church or, whatever. And so I just would stay up and do my thing. And then I would go to bed, or I'd go up to my room. And I remember just being on my knees in my room and begging God to take this pain from me, this feeling of being not enough, and crying and begging him to make me skinny. Just make me skinny, Lord, and then I won't have to battle this anymore. And crying it was probably Jars of Clay that was playing in my room, and I would go through this cycle, and I would wake up the next day and do it again. And I was a sophomore in high school, and I was having all these other issues. I had stopped making myself throw up for a while just because I was tired of getting caught, started gaining weight back, got a weird haircut. I mean, my kids always say if it wasn't back then, I pretty much looked like a boy. I had done a glow up post on Facebook at one time and said, hey, check me on high school and check me now. And somebody commented and was like, your son looks just like you. And I was like, whoa, that was me from my sophomore year of high school. And so I just had some things that I was struggling with, and I didn't really have a lot of direction at the time and didn't really want it. If my mom did try to give it to me, I probably pushed her away pretty hard. And so there was just different things that I was going through in this season that was really hard for me, because I had grown up in the church, right? I knew that Jesus died on the cross for me. I knew that God could heal me. I knew that he could save me from whatever I was going through. And I was just struggling with the fact that why did I feel so bad then? And so I was starting to grow some resentment, even though I didn't really feel it at the time. Well, in the middle of all that, I really did dive into church, because we would travel around and we would, do human videos, which if you don't know what that is, it was pretty much like we would act out a song back in the day, which was super cool, but not so much now. And I just wasn't home much, kind of out doing my thing between school and youth group. And then I remember coming home one day, and my parents were sitting at the table and told me that they needed to talk to me, and told me my dad had cancer. He had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I didn't really know what that meant. I obviously knew it wasn't good. I didn't know how serious it was. They said that he was going to go through chemo treatments, that he was going to fight it, and all of these things, and it was in his lymph nodes. And I just remember thinking, God, you can't take my dad from me. My dad was my hero. I always felt like he was my best friend growing up. He was the calm to my storm. I remember fighting with my mom. My mom and I were a lot alike. I didn't realize it then until now, but we just didn't click always. She was going through her own things while I was going through my stages of life, and I was probably pretty junkie to her. As a teenager, probably had a pretty bad attitude and could have treated her a lot better. But my dad, I just remember fighting with my mom, and I would go lay on my dad's office floor, and he'd be like, "What's going on, kiddo?" And there was like this scary sense of unsureness when they talked about him having cancer. And I just remember praying, like, "Lord, you cannot take my dad from me." I remember going to youth group that night and talking to my friends and crying. And my church family was just so amazing. I mean, they praying over my dad. And I'm going through all these motions. I'm still dealing with this eating disorder. Now my dad's going through chemo treatments. There's times where he's in the hospital because the chemo is so hard on his body. I have this identity issue of like feeling not good enough, but yet I'm still friends with everybody and taking care of everybody because I'm the strong one. And I'm showing up, and I'm trying to lead, and I'm doing good in school, and all of this was like hidden, right? Like I was hiding behind all these different things and all these different feelings. And I would try and get involved in stuff in school. I was a mascot my sophomore year of high school, Perky the Panther, because I was fun and I was involved, and it was actually a lot of fun. So if you ever have a chance to be a mascot, you should probably do it, until a little kid pulled my tail off, which is actually the principal's kid. So that didn't go over very well. But I just kind of like dove into my friends, and in the middle of all of that, just kept praying silently to myself that God could just take some of this hurt from me. I remember when my dad was going through the different chemo treatments, we did take a lot of missions trips for church. We went out to Indianapolis a couple times, which is one of my favorite memories with Dee. We just, Pixie Sticks and Jolt was like what got us home that night, because we decided that we couldn't stay or something, so we had to drive home that night. And so there was like somebody in the van ahead of us, and I was riding with Dee, and it was a blast, one of my favorite memories. But we made it home and got to tell people about Jesus. So, it was just a really weird time in high school. But again, I stayed active in all the things and hung out with my friends. And then moving into my junior year, I was one of the younger ones in my class, so I was still only 15. So I kept riding to youth group with my friend Laura. Hadn't really got a job yet. And then, because I was a Panther, they convinced me to go out for football cheerleading. Now, I was the one I was like, I'm never going to be a cheerleader. Like, that's just not something that I do. I'm not like that. But they were like, football cheerleaders can wear pants. That's what sold me. I was like, okay, as long as I don't have to wear a skirt, I will wear the pants and I will be a football cheerleader. And so I did that my junior year, and that's when Coach Nikki came into my life. Now, Coach Nikki Jobs had so much impact on me in high school. She always spoke life into me. She figured out what I was going through pretty quickly. She confronted me about it and prayed with me. And I just knew that God put her in my life at a specific time, because he knew that I needed the extra support, and he knew that I was struggling. And she was fun and she was funny, but she could love so well, and she could coach in more ways than just cheerleading. And so we stayed friends for a very, very long time. I still see her every once in a while and give her big hugs because of the impact that she had on me. So that was really my junior year, going into my junior year. When I turned 16, though, I decided to get a job. A lot of my friends in youth group were working at McDonald's, and so I was like, I'm going to go work at McDonald's with these guys. And so it was fun. Like McDonald's, I remember sitting down for my interview with my boss, Tom, and, I wasn't my boss yet, but Tom, and getting hired, and so excited that I was going to get to start this new thing. And I started right away and loved it. Now, I was always one to excel in everything that I did, and I think that a lot of it was to cover up for the insecurities that I had. I think that if I couldn't be good at everything, at least try to be good at what I could control. And so, still battling an eating disorder, but working at McDonald's with all my friends, going to youth group, and putting on a happy face. And so I did a lot of that. I would do school and work, and I met a lot of my long-term friends at McDonald's. And it was going okay, but again, I'm working at a restaurant, and I have an eating disorder, so that was always interesting and a struggle at the same time. Not so good days, but not terrible days. And so junior year, and started to become a little bit more girly, thank you probably to my cheerleading experience. And then going into my senior year, I went out for basketball cheerleading and football cheerleading, and I was actually captain of the cheerleading team. So imagine that, going from the Panther to captain of the football cheerleading squad, and just really enjoying school and life and working. And it was pretty good. I was still struggling with eating disorder. It started to become just part of life. It started to just become who I was. Nobody really knew. I dealt with it on my own, but I planned everything around it. I knew what I was going to eat throughout the day or what I was not going to eat. And it became kind of an addiction, obsession, but I think I hid it quite well. So I went through my senior year, working at McDonald's, still making friends, hanging out with all these different people. And then I met a boy. I met a boy at McDonald's, and his name was Tony. And, after struggling for so long, wanting to be liked and not really having a boyfriend and nobody really liking me, but being friends with everybody and having to hook everybody up in high school and being in the counseling when somebody broke up and asking so-and-so if they'll go to the dance with so-and-so and always being that friend and not having a relationship of my own, I always felt like something was wrong with me, that I couldn't be loved. And so when I met Tony and he showed me some attention, I was smitten, to say the least. I thought I was just infatuated with him. He was cool. He was out of high school. I was working at McDonald's, just graduating. And so when I graduated, I was 17. It was the summer of 99. And we hung out. We hung out a lot that summer. Got pretty close, probably closer than we should have. But that was just where I was. I was infatuated with him. And so we hung out doing things, whatever. I was a kid and I was trying to impress, probably. I was trying to just make sure that he stayed liking me, I guess, just because I finally found someone who did like me. Still struggling with an eating disorder the entire way. I would just not eat if I was around him and things like that. But then the fall. In the fall, Tony also raced dirt bikes. And so we were starting to, we hung out all summer, and in the fall, his birthday was in October, and he was like, hey, I'm going to go up to Byron, I'm going to race my bike, I would love for you to come out there. And I was like, okay. He's like, my mom's coming. So I had asked my friend Teresa to come, and I was like, yeah, we'll be there. So we drove up there and met him there, and all was good. He went around, he did a couple of races, and it was the last race, I think. And I remember walking him down to the start line and telling him good luck, telling him goodbye, and seeing him at the end. And they go so many rounds around, so I would go up this hill, and I had a certain spot that I would watch him, and I knew that he would come around. I could see his number. And I remember watching him come around for the first 3 times, and then the 4th time, he didn't come around. And instantly, I knew something was wrong. I was like, where is he? I watched all these people pass, so I run up the hill thinking that I would be able to see better. And as soon as I got up to the top of the hill, there was this tabletop jump, and at the bottom of the jump, or at the end of the jump, Tony was laying face down in the dirt with a bunch of paramedics, people around him, trying to figure out what was going on. And instantly, I had this fear that flooded over me. And so his mom ran up there. His mom was there too, and they were like, "We're going to take him by ambulance. He's unconscious, but he's breathing." Knocked out all his teeth. That's what all the blood is from, because there was a lot of blood. And so she was like, "Are you okay if you drive the truck and the bike and meet me at the hospital? I'm going to ride in the ambulance." And I was like, "Absolutely." So thank God there was people there that helped me. I was 18, right? I'm trying to load up this dirt bike. I've never done that before. Learning up this dirt bike, trying to figure out where I'm going. There's no GPS then, so I'm like, how am I going to get to the hospital? But we actually caught up with the ambulance that I didn't realize then. But got to Rockford Memorial Hospital, got in there. I think my friend Teresa drove my car to the hospital. Anyways, we got in there, and we're waiting in the waiting room, and the doctor, we're joking around because we think that it's just his teeth, that he just lost all his teeth. And so I remember sitting there and joking around with his mom, who I had just met that day, mind you, and hearing a code blue, I think it is, come over the speaker, and thinking, oh, I hope it's not for Tony. right? And then we kind of shoving it off because I was like, no, it's just his teeth. Like, what would that be? Like, you know? And then I remember the doctor coming in, and I could tell by his face it wasn't good. And I remember him sitting down across from his mom and saying, hey, we did all that we could do, but we couldn't save him. Apparently his aorta had burst upon impact, and so he bled out, and they tried to repair and they couldn't. And so I was this kid sitting in this waiting room with my friend Teresa and this mom that I had just met for the first time, thinking, this can't be happening. And she's going through her reaction, screaming, his mom, and I'm sitting there. And I looked at Teresa, and his mom kind of went to talk to the doctor in the hallway, and I remember looking at Teresa and saying, Teresa, I never told him about Jesus. And I don't know what he believed. We had different talks about it throughout the time that we hung out together, but nothing like super deep. I think I was just like, I never told him that he needed to believe in Jesus to get to heaven, and I ran out of time and he was taken from me. And so I went through a lot of different emotions that day. It was just a very weird day. Obviously, death will do that to you, but being a kid, like I was a kid trying to deal with all of this stuff and figure out what was going on, and all these different emotions with this mom and my friend. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of cell phones, so there wasn't a way to get a hold of people. And I remember getting back to Freeport and trying to get a hold of his best friend and tell them what was going on, and them not believing me. And my family didn't really even know about him. So like, how do you tell your family, and how do you deal with that, and how do you go through that? And it was just a very, very hard day, obviously. And so I got sad for a while. I was kind of in disbelief, like it didn't happen, couldn't have happened, like what was going on. My friends at McDonald's were probably my biggest comfort at the time, just because he had worked there too, so they knew what I was going through. And then I got angry. I got angry pretty quickly because of all the stuff that I had gone through in high school and all of this darkness that I had carried with this addiction. And I finally found someone that liked me, and he was taken from me. I was pretty angry at God. I went through this. This started the dark phase of my life. I pretty much walked away from God for a while. I didn't step foot into a church unless I was going to my dad's church for a holiday. I remember thinking, I started to drink a lot. I think a lot of the drinking was to numb away the pain from the whole experience and seeing him. I was actually asked by his mom at the hospital to come in the room with her so she didn't have to go alone to see him, to say goodbye. And so I just remember him being very cold, and that was something that stuck with me for a very long time. And so, yeah, I was angry. I was angry and I was drinking, and it started my partying phase because I didn't care. I didn't care about myself. I just didn't have any belief. It was so hard, growing up in the church, it's installed in you, but during some hard times, man, it is sometimes hard to hold on to that. And so, again, this began my very dark phase of life. And so I did a lot of partying, some pretty intense partying. I didn't go home a whole lot. I didn't go to church a whole lot. I wasn't really involved with my family for a while. And I was still working at McDonald's, loved McDonald's. That was probably my go-to. I just excelled there very quickly. Crew of the month when I first started, to crew trainer. I became a manager when I first turned 18, and just wanted to work my way up. Like, I love to be able to train and teach and lead people. That's where I was good at. So I was going to stay there. And then I was working my way up to a salary position, and at the time they didn't have anything open, and it was either there or Rockford. So I was like waiting for a position to open, and so I was like, well, I need more money. Like, I had an apartment and I had different things going on, and obviously I was partying a lot, so I needed to be able to afford that. And so I was like, I'm going to have to get a second job until a position opens up. So I went across the street to Pizza Hut and became a waitress at Pizza Hut. And I loved it. Obviously, I love to talk to people, and I love to make extra money. So I waitressed. It was pretty easy because I wasn't the boss. And even though they had asked me to become one, I said no. I was pretty loyal to McDonald's. And so I worked there for a while, and then I met my now ex-husband. And he was kind of in the partying scene too. So we were two peas in a pod. At the time, we didn't really have any interest in each other. We just kind of hung out. And over time, I went through my things and he kind of went through his, and we would hang out. And then we decided that maybe we should start talking. And it ended up with me getting pregnant. Now, this is where God can work all things for good. In the season of life that I was in, without going into too much detail, I was going down a very bad road. I was angry. Obviously, I was depressed. I hid it well at work at McDonald's, but I was wild. And I was at the point of my life where I was just kind of like, drink and work. And maybe even thought about trying out some other things. And the moment that I stood in that bathroom with my friend Becky, and I took that test and found out that I was going to be a mom, everything stopped. And it was time to be a mom. And I remember the feeling. I cried because who was I to bring a child into this world? Right? I was probably the most unfit is what I was feeling at the time. That this kid, because I didn't know it was a girl at the time, was going to depend on me, and I needed to figure my life out. And so I always call Raven my little lifesaver, because if she hadn't come along, if he hadn't given me the good through the bad, I don't know where I would be today. And so I always tease her, like, you're my little lifesaver. Even though you gave me lots of headaches growing up, he probably saved my life. And so that is when, that's when mom started. Like, that's when my momhood started. I look back at that now, and that's just where I'm going to end today, because getting into the next part of the season of life is a whole other story. But I look back now, and I walked away from God, but he never walked away from me. And I can say that so confidently because I look at the things that I went through. Even in high school, I was never alone. I knew that he was in my bedroom right next to me when I was kneeling and crying and begging him to take that from me. I knew that he was walking by me when I didn't know if my dad was going to make it through cancer, which he did when I was in high school the first time. And when I was going through the partying and I felt like there was no God, he was standing right next to me. And so I look at that part of my life and the always the feeling of not ever being enough, or the struggle that I went through. And I just thank God for carrying me, for protecting me, for bringing me through it, for making me a mom so that I would straighten out, and then just blessing me with an amazing daughter. So that is me. That is the beginning of my life and my journey. Probably up until about 21 years old is when I had Raven. I had just turned 22 when she was born, and so I was young and still going through and getting out of the things that I was in and still trying to figure life out. But I was blessed with this absolutely beautiful, healthy baby. And so God is so good and so faithful. And looking back at all the things that I thought were terrible, and they were. I mean, they were really hard things. Remember, God is good and life is hard. And looking back now, I know that He never left my side. And so, again, like I said in the last one, whatever you're walking through, even though it might feel empty and it might feel hard, and you might be like, where is God in this moment? I promise you, friend, He's walking right beside you. And you just have to call on His name. So this is my testimony. This is just a piece of it. But I thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing this journey with me. I look back now and know that even these hard things have shaped me into who I am today. And so I am proud to be able to tell you it's hard. There's probably things that my family will listen to and realize that they never heard that part before. But I'm willing to do it so that you can understand that in all things, he can work things for good, and that he's got a plan and a purpose, and that your story does matter. Because remember, it's your story, but it's always for his glory. Until next time, friends.